Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leathercraft Supply. Let's make a gorgeous guitar strap. Is that not a beautiful project? And relatively easy, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Well, first off, this beautiful leather. This has quickly become one of my favorite leathers that we sell at Weaver Leather. It's the Crazy Horse Gray. Two things I love about it. First off, it's an 8 to 9 ounce, but supple. So it's going to be extremely durable, but it's also going to be comfortable on the shoulder for our guitar player. Secondly, though, it's a veg tan. So it's going to take a beautiful bevel, groove, and slick. We'll have gorgeous edges on this. Now, we're going to change up the pattern just a little bit for a good reason. I love a buckle set. I love it particularly when there's an equal distance between buckle, keeper, and tip. Looks very clean and tight. But this doesn't leave any room for our guitar player to adjust. So let's jump around to the back. Let's add our adjustment on the back. Quick, clean, and easy, and I can get 6 full inches of adjustment there. Actually, more adjustment here than I could get here. All right, so at this point, how about more strap, less flap, okay? What we're gonna do, we're gonna step over to our pattern table, and we're gonna make a pattern for our 2 billet pieces. Now, to save us a little time, I've cut 2 straps. Now, I've cut these just a hair under 1 inch. Our buckle set's 1 inch, so I wanna come in just a little bit under that so everything moves smoothly. Now, we're gonna start with our buckle strap so we can get a good even measurement between our 3 pieces. So let's pick a point roughly in the middle of the strap and make a mark. This is our keeper. We're going to work out from our keeper. All right. Now, easy enough. I want to rivet on both sides of that keeper to secure that in. So I'm going to put a 1 1/4 inch spread between those. That gives me enough room to get a setter on those rivets without having to move that around and try to push it over. So 1 1/4 inch spread, cut in half. We're going to need to make a mark 5/8 inch either side of our keeper. And let's circle those, all right? Easy enough. Now our next step is an oblong hole. Now, rule of thumb here, 1 inch strap, 1 inch oblong. I tend to like to add to that a little bit because I want this bar to be able to move easily through there. And if it sticks up, that gives it room to move on the back side, all right? So, 1 1/4 inch oblong. Now, with that, not a rule of thumb, but what I tend to do is double that distance for my spread. So 1 1/4 inch, 2.5 inches between this rivet hole and the rivet hole on the back. So 2.5, and then of course 1 1/4. Easy enough. Let's measure in 1 1/4. There we are. Let's draw in our oblong so we don't get confused as to which end of the strap is which. Now, one last point here. Notice that round end punch. That really adds a nice touch. Not necessary, but very clean and very professional looking. But here's the thing, to make that work, what I'm going to do, right at the bottom of my rivet, is the beginning of my round end. So let's take this and actually start about right there. Now we're going to punch that. We're going to use a round end punch for that. And we'll eyeball that, but let's mark it there again so we know which end is which. Now, for the strap pin or strap knob on the guitar, we need exactly a 1/4 inch hole with a 3/4 inch slit. In fact, that slit helps us get that hole onto the knob. But here's the thing, we want the stress towards that direction. We want that cut away from the stress so my guitar will sit in this round area. All right, so 1/4 inch. But also, we're going to drop this in. We're going to measure from our second hole. Well, I need a little extra room there between the end of the tip and that hole. So let's give that about 5 inches. So we're going to drop down 10 down to 5, make a circle. Now here's the thing, these are just standard rivet holes. This hole needs to be exact. So I'm going to drop in 1 1/4 inch and I'm going to put a star next to that. Now last move here. I don't want this end punch as close as I have it here. I want a little bit of a tab there. So let's drop an extra inch onto that and then we can punch from there. Nice. Okay, so there's our buckle side. Easy enough. Let's step over to the tongue side. Well, right off, in my opinion, I have a little too much room here between my last rivet and my round end, so I'm going to bring that in a little bit. So from the end of our pattern paper, let's come in exactly 3/4 of an inch to our first hole. Nice. Now, again, 1 1/4 inch. We're going to see that increment pop up regularly. Same thing here. They're not too bunched, but they're not too far apart. So 1 1/4 inch, easy measurement there. Good. That's for our 2 rivets to secure the strap onto the body. Now, this hole, we can't have this too high or the buckle's actually not going to get up there. It needs to clear the end of the strap. So I'm going to drop this 2 inches out. Gives me ample room, and that's my first size hole. Now, I always aim for the second hole, all my straps, all my belts, because that gives us always a little extra room to come in. Now, with the guitar strap, this gives our guitar player a little extra room to fine tune in a hurry if they need to. But still, that's going to be a nice measurement there, but it's not as clean as we want. So we're going to drop that down. So let's add in 5 holes at 1 inch increments. There we go. Now, laying this on our second hole, we need about 1 1/2 to 1 3/4 inches between our keeper and our tip. So this last hole, let's bring that out 1 1/2 inches. Now that's roughly the center of our tip. So if we lay that down, right next to that, there we go, easy enough. Now, we're going to hand cut that, but let's go ahead and put an English point on that. And again on this end, let's drop in our round end. Well, easy enough. We have our 2 short patterns ready to go. So let's jump over to the main table and cut our body patterns. And to cut our main body pieces, well, first thing we need is a size. So let's take a tape measure. Easy enough. I'm going to wrap this around just like a guitar strap. Now, if you don't have a tape measure, piece of twine, piece of lace will work. Just get your measurement, lay that against a straight edge. Now with this, I'm going to measure 3, maybe 4 inches above my belt. Now here's the thing, I'm 5'10", about 140. So let's use my size as the lower end of the strap and expand from there. So 3 or 4 inches here. Take my strap and I'm going to measure around to roughly, give or take, about the bottom of my back pocket. So that should give me about 51 inches. And it does, right on. Now here's the thing though, here's where this can be confusing. That's not my body size, that's the strap size. We've got a billet on one end, we've got a little extra room past our pinhole on that end. But also too here, let's go ahead and make a template, because on one end of our body, we're going to need a belt tip and the other a round end. Well, on our extension, same thing, round end one end, belt tip on the other. So I'm going to step over here to my pattern table and let's just make a small template that will make all of that very easy. Now for the template, I'm going to take a piece of paper a little bit heavier because I'll be able to use this time and time again. 2.5 inches width of our body. I'm going to fold that in half. Therefore, any cut I make is going to be perfectly symmetrical. That's what we're looking for. 2.5 inches of width. Now, I don't want to go 2.5 because that's going to be an extremely deep point. So let's drop back to about 1 3/4. We're simply going to make a mark right across the paper. Open that up. Now, I've cut this backwards so many times, but if I start over here and cut, I'm going to make this big, deep V. Don't want that, right? So let's take this and we're going to start on the spine, and I'm simply going to cut an even curve right down to my point, or right down to my mark. Well, that looks pretty good. Let's trim that point just a little bit. Make that a little bit more rounded. Well, that looks great. All right, let's flip this around because we're going to need a round end on the other end of both straps. Easy enough. If I don't have a template, I can use a spool of lace, a jar lid, a coffee cup. But let's drop that right to the end, and as best we can, try to center that. Draw the mark. Now we're going to use the same trick. We're going to bend this over, so again, always symmetrical. Let's just follow that curve easily around. There we go. Well, that looks great. Let's trim that off. Nice. Okay, so we've got a template. We've got a round end on one end, and we've got our belt tip on the other. So now we're set ready to make our body pattern. Now, to save us a little time, I've simply taped some notebook paper together, about 48 inches long by our body width, 2.5 inches wide. So let's start on our billet end, because down here we've got our pinhole. This is a known quantity. We know the measurements here. So therefore, that's going to make it very easy to measure the full length. So on this end, belt tip punch from our template. Let's drop this in, mark that. Now, I don't typically like to use pen on my patterns because it can be such a mess. but pencil in this situation simply isn't going to stand out on the camera. All right, I'm going to drop in our tongue billet. Now I don't want this rivet too close to the end, so let's come in 1 inch from the end of our English point and make a mark. Well, that's our first rivet hole, so let's circle that. Now again, we're going to go with a 1 1/4 inch spread. 1 inch will certainly work, but 1 1/4 seems to be just right. So let's drop in another mark at 1 1/4. There's our rivet marks. All right, so easy enough. Now, let's lay this out because this is the easiest thing to do to measure this. I'm going to take my tongue billet, square that on my marks. Now, with my buckle strap or buckle billet, I'm going to take this and on the oblong, I'm simply going to bend that back over, just like we were putting a buckle in. So now, let's lay this down. Now, I've got a 1 inch spread between my billet and my buckle, and I want my buckle on the second hole. So I'm going to put my billet, center of the oblong, square on the 3rd size hole. Well, that's easy enough. All right, there's my pin. So let's measure from here 51 inches to the other end of our strap. Now, this is not a great camera shot because I'm trying to squeeze in 51 inches of length here, but we won't be here long. So I'm going to measure from my pinhole, drop my tape down, going to come down, make a mark at 51 inches. I'm going to circle that. That's my pinhole. Now that'd be a great measurement if I don't want to add an extension, but we're going to drop this piece in. So let's flip this around and work on that end of the pattern. Now, to save us a little time, I have cut an extra piece, 2.5 by about 11, maybe 12 inches. I'm going to lay that right next to my main body. And let's drop a little tape onto that. There we go, nice. Now, first thing we're going to do, this mark, this is our pinhole mark, but we're going to cut that off on our main body. So let's transfer that over to our extension. There we go, circle that, 1 1/4 inch so we know what we're punching there. Now, on this end, for our extension, I'm going to have 4 holes on our main body, easy enough. Then we're going to have 5 sets of holes on our extension. But here's the thing, I don't want this to be too close to my pinhole when I get down towards the end. So let's take our template and our round end, and let's just come up about 1 inch. And let's trim that. Well, we won't trim it just yet, but let's go ahead and drop in a round end punch. Nice, so now we know where the end of that strap is. Now, let's do this. Let's come up 2 inches from this line, from the pinhole, and I'm going to make a mark there. Then let's square to our top, draw all the way across. Now, 1 1/4 inch increments. Again, a little bit closer will certainly work, but to me it looks a little bunched. So let's come out, square across the top best we can, make another line. All right, now we only need 2 lines on our main body, but we're going to have 5 lines over here. So let's go ahead and draw in 3 more lines at 1 1/4 inch increments. And again, if we take our time here, everything will line up when we drop this back together. Now we're going to need a belt tip punch for the end of our extension. So there's our pinhole. Let's come down just about 1 inch. That should be enough. Drop that in, line across, that's our end point. Drop that in and draw in our belt tip punch. Now, same on the other end. Let's come out 1 inch past our last set of holes, draw in a line, that's our end mark. So with the other end, our round end, let's drop that down and draw that in. And again, the pen is just a mess and there is ink all over me, but this is going to work for us. Well, easy enough. There's our extension piece. Now let's draw our rivet holes in 1/2 inch from each edge. So I'm going to drop my square in, 1/2 inch. Let's make that parallel across our pattern. There we go. Now we're covering 5 holes on our extension, but only 2 holes on our main body. So that's all we have to mark right there. And 1/2 inch in. And again, if we're accurate here, when we lay this piece over this, all these holes will fit perfectly. Now, again, with good pattern maintenance, let's go ahead and circle our holes. Very nice. Now, we're going to cut some leather. I'm going to do 2 more things, again, to save us time before we jump to leather. I'm going to cut in my end punch, round in, and end punch on that end. And I'm going to draw in guitar strap, width, length, and the same thing on this piece. And the last cut on my main body, going to round that tip just a bit, make that very, very clean, very professional. That looks good. Now, like I said, good pattern maintenance. Let's mark everything that we're going to punch in black, because we don't want to punch a hole that's marked in red, because here very shortly we're going to use red to mark our spots. So therefore, we notice right off the bat we don't punch a hole there, we're simply going to make a mark. All right, so with our spots, let's start on this side. Now, with our sample, we're simply going to run a line of spots down the middle, 2 inches apart on our center line. So let's mark that out, starting with this hole, starting with our second hole, because that's going to make everything very clean, very tight. So as I move down, I'm simply going to mark every 2 inches. And our last mark down at this end, and that's a little bit close. I tell you what, I may nix that all together. Now, like I said, we're going to go with a red mark to circle holes that we are going to mark and not punch, because if we put a punch hole where we need to mark for a spot, spot's not going to sit in a hole. And the last markings on my pattern. Now, again, guitar strap, and I've got my width and length, same here. So, patterns are ready to go. Let's cut some leather. Now, the great thing about this project, it's all straight lines. It's basically all strapping. So we're going to use a wood-handled strap cutter, and this is one of the most useful, utilized tools in my shop. Cut a perfect strap every time. It's easy enough to use. All I'm going to do is right here, set my cross arm at 2.5 inches, tighten that down, and I tend to put just a little extra tight on it there. Now I'm going to take this, butt the edge of my leather against the handle, and look at that. It literally is that easy to cut perfect straps. There we go, just right, 2.5 on the nose. Well, now for our billets, our tongue strap and the buckle strap, we're going to need to back off to 1 inch. I'm going to drop my wood handle strap cutter right down to 1 inch, tighten that. I'm going to go right back to here. I'm going to butt my handle against it. There we go. Now, a little trick here. I'm going to take this tab from the strap I'm cutting. I'm going to pull that just a hair, literally just a hair to the left. That'll keep that clean against my straight edge. There we go, 2 perfect straps, 2.5 and 1 inch. Now, we're going to mark our holes and then mark and cut our end cuts. Very clean. This strap and this pattern is ready to go. Let's get the quartz out and punch some holes. Now let's start with our main body, because we're going to use 3 sizes of holes here. Now, if you have a revolving punch, that's no issue. You can certainly get holes close enough to what we need, because all we want is our Chicago screw not to be snug in the hole, but we don't want it floating around either. Same with the rivet. Right here, we know we need a 1/4 inch punch. So 1/4 inch, 3/16 inch for Chicago screws, and 1/8 inch for rivets. Now I'm going to punch those, flip this strap around, punch those holes, and then we'll go to our billets. And our last hole, that's our 1/4 inch pinhole. Now this is funny, I always joke that these little leather plugs have absolutely no use in my shop. In fact, they tend to be a little bit of a headache. But we need to set this guy aside, because we're going to use that very shortly to help us make our slit for our pinhole. All right, body is done, ready to go. Let's move that aside and let's bring in our billets. Now, first off, we're going to use 3 different tools here. We're going to use a round end punch, a belt tip punch, and an oblong punch. So let's punch our holes first though, so it's easy to see exactly where these are going to go. Now, rivet holes, so 1/8 inch. There's our pinhole, 1/4 inch. Then over here, rivet holes, again, 1/8 of an inch. And then size holes. Let's go with 1/8 of an inch on those. And our last hole, 1/4 inch for our strap pin hole. Very nice. And again, let's save that little plug just in case we lose the other one. There he is. Nice. Now, let's go over to our belt tip round and oblong punches. All right, going to lay my pattern right next to my billet for my oblong. So I'm going to drop my oblong in. There we go. Very clean and straight, just what I'm looking for. Now on this billet, I'm going to put a round in on our bend back. Then I'm also going to put one in down near the pinhole. Very clean, very professional. There we go. Oh, she won't punch for me. There we are. Now, we're going to come back to this in just a minute. Let's jump over to an English point because we're going to use this on our tip. Now, we're going to hand set a buckle tip, but let's drop in an English point just to alert us that that's where that tip's going to go. Then on the other end, this is the end of the billet on the front of the strap, so let's put a round in there. Nice. Now, let's go ahead and set the slit on our pinholes. Now, setting our slit, this is a tough one because we cannot mess up here. What we're going to do is we're going to put a slit away from the stress. So the guitar pin is going to rest on this side of the hole. I cannot nick that at all. Without a nick, that's actually going to burnish as the strap is used. But if I have even the smallest cut there, it's going to start to tear and it's not going to last. So we're going to use this little plug. We're going to put that in there, take our knife, and we're going to make a slit away from our stress, about 3/4 of an inch long. But that little plug is going to keep me from cutting into the other side of the leather. There we go. Now I've got my cut. Let's just put our knife in there and nick easily. There we go. Good cut. Now let's jump over to this one. Same thing. Drop in our plug. Let's make as straight a cut as we can, about 3/4 of an inch long. There we go, and that cut through nicely. Now let's pick that up, drop our knife in, and now just finish that little cut. Perfect. No nick on either side. This guitar strap is going to last for years. All right, let's bevel and groove our edges, make this very professional looking. And that's exactly right. That's what we want, but here's the great thing. We're going to really dress up the edges on this strap with 2 inexpensive hand tools. Here's exactly what we're going to do. Now, on the right side, got a strap. Looks good. It's going to work, no problem. But on the left, now we've got a groove and we've cut off. We've used our bevel to cut off that hard top edge, which is going to make this very finished looking. And here's the great thing. This is done with 2 inexpensive hand tools. All right, let's start with our groover. So technically a groover is a tool that's going to cut a groove in the edge of our leather so we can sink our chisel in that and get a very clean hand sewing line. But I tend to use this just about everywhere because it's part of my edge treatment. Now, right here, all I need to do, set my arm, again, a little bit past 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to butt the shank against the edge of my leather, and I'm simply going to draw. How easy is that? Now, let's follow our round in and come right back to the point. Very nice. Well, that's easy enough. All right, so I'm going to do our other 3 pieces, then we're going to jump over to our bevel. And the last groove. Well, that looks great. Very clean, very straight, very professional. Well, that's just the point. Now, let's jump over to our bevel. What a bevel is going to do, like I said, simply going to knock off the hard top corner on our edge. Now, we can do the front, the back, and then slick, but for this project, we're just going to bevel the front. Now, we have got the sharpest bevels I have ever seen, and I love our bevels. This is a number 2, great for 8 to 9 ounce, simply a number 2 Western edger. So I'm going to drop this in. I can drop that little cut right down onto the edge of my leather. I'm going to come out about 40 degrees, 45 degrees, somewhere in there. Simply going to push. Clean and easy. All right, now I'm going to groove, or I'm going to bevel all my edges, and from that, we're just about ready to assemble. And our last bevel line, very nice. Now, one last step before we knock this beautiful project together. We're going to take our pattern, gorgeous pattern, very clean and tight, looks good. Let's lay this on our main body, and we're going to mark with a scribe our spot holes. Now these are marked in red, so we're not going to make any mistake here. So I'm simply going to mark each hole, then we're going to step over here. Let's knock some spots into this. Now I love spots. I use them on a lot of projects because they look good, they're easy to set, and they're inexpensive. So we're going to use a 1/4 inch nickel spot. Simple line right down the middle, going to look very good. So let's use a setter, and this is easy enough. All it is, simple throat and a setter with a concaved end. So what I'm going to do is load a spot in there, just enough to where I can see the tines. Going to take a scrap piece of leather, actually just scrap piece for my strap in. I'm going to lay that under the area. Now I'm going to leave my tines sticking out so I can straddle the mark I've made with my awl. Again, concaved end down in there. Now here's the trick with this little tool. I'm going to put about 70% of my pressure on the throat and about 30% on the setter itself. Nice, that's easy enough. But that's just the first step. Yep, that's stuck in, very nice. Now I can see both tines here are sticking out. I could take this and simply hit that, but that's not the best thing to do. What I'll do is I'll set all my spots, leave my tines sticking up. I'm going to come back with this tool and I'm going to bend those tines in from both sides. So I'll go down one, bend that side in, come back the other, bend that side in. Because now I can take this, simply put it on my quartz, and not enough to ding it, but just give that enough of a tap, and now those tines, they've actually sunk into the leather. I can barely feel them. They're not going to snag on anything. So I'm going to set my spots every 2 inches, just from our awl marks, from one end of this to the other, and at that point, we are going to be ready to put this thing together. I had tapped down our last 3 spots. Very nice, look at that, very clean. I can barely feel the tines, but I can also feel that they've actually sunk back into the leather. Again, those are not going to snag or catch on anything. But also too, let's do this. We've set these by hand. Let's put this next to a straight edge and see how we did. I'm going to square our edge. There we go. Let's lay that in right there. Look at that. I don't think we could have set a cleaner line with a machine. That is beautiful. Now, let's step over to our quartz. We're going to put our 2 billets together. Now, setting our buckle, setting our keeper, relatively easy. We're going to use a double cap rivet in nickel, but we also sell this gorgeous black powder coat rivet. Would that not be gorgeous? Not only as the rivet, the closure, but also as a decorative, and also always the gorgeous rich brass. So let's take our buckle, we're going to drop this in, tine through the oblong, and bend this back. Now, 1/4 inch nickel double cap. Because we've taken our time on our pattern, our buckle holes or our rivet holes are going to line up perfectly. Now I'm going to let this hang off the edge because what I want, see that loop? I don't want to try to have to set my rivet because my rivet's always going to be a little bit at an angle. But if we set this on the edge of our quartz and let that loop hang off, we're going to get a perfect clean set every time. Now, cap, take my rivet setter. There we go, nice and clean. Now let's drop in our keeper. Going to come in from the other end, sit him right between our rivet holes, and as always, look at that. Hole falls right into place. Let's take a cap, drop that in. That just looks spectacular. How easy is that? All right, so, like I said, this one is a little bit of a trick. So we're going to step back over here because now we're not going to punch. We're actually going to cut the end of the tip for this buckle tip. Now, in years of working with leather, and I've had this question 100 times, what's the easiest way to set a buckle tip? Well, I've tried several ways short of a die cut or a die press, and I always seem to come back to the same way, hand cutting this. Now, this is an 8 to 9 ounce, maybe about a 9 to 10 ounce leather. So first off, it's going to be a little too thick. So I can take a skiver and I can simply work the leather off of the end. Now I can really dig in and I can really bite here with this blade, but I kind of more want to shave so I don't go too far. Well, first off, let's see if that got us close. Yeah, there we are, nice. So that's going to slide on easily. Now let's take our tip. What I want to do is put that right down there at the end, and I'm going to take my awl. Simply going to make a mark on both sides of my leather. Now with our knife, let's cut about halfway to our groove line, both sides. And since we've got a good awl mark there, that's going to be clean and even, and that's going to be important here in just a minute. Now let's lay our buckle back on this. Now with our awl, we're not going to see much of a line here, but down here at the end, I'll have a bit of a line. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come in about 1/8 of an inch from my edge up here, and then I'm going to keep that close to that line, about 1/8 of an inch inside of it. Clean new blade each time. Nice. Now let's do the same thing on the other side. So I'm actually coming in just about halfway to my groove line. Well, let's see if that's going to work. Well, that's pretty close. We've got about 3/16 of an inch there. So let's do this. Let's come in and trim a little bit closer around the tip, almost right to the groove line. That looks good. There we go. Now that's pretty close. I need to trim that tip just maybe a little bit. Let that sink a little deeper in there. Nice, that should fit. And it does, fits nicely. Now let's do this. Because I don't want too hard shoulders here, I'm going to take those and I'm just going to clip off the corner of that. Just so that moves through our buckle and our keeper very easily. Nice. Now that's a good fit. Now I've been a little careless here because this is a big point. These little screws. And I'm not kidding, this is typical of Weaver leather. Everywhere else I buy a buckle set, I'm lucky even if I get one screw. But with Weaver, not just one, I get two, and it actually comes in these little screw holes in the package. Very nice. Now, let's take this. It's sitting on our strap. So let's take our awl and just punch a little bit in because of the tip of these little screws, and these are just impossible to see. But the tip of that screw is pointed, so it's going to screw down into my leather strap. Now, what I'm going to do is now that I've pressed that in there, and again, don't even sneeze or those guys are going to go away and you'll never see them again. Now that I've added a punch hole, that's going to sit right down in there. And there we go, last screw down and tight. Now, here's the thing. If I leave that screw where it is, every time it goes in and out of the belt, it's going to scratch the outside of the belt, and I don't want that. So now that I've got these set, and I've really got them down in there good, I'm going to take a piece of sandpaper and simply sand off the top portion of those screws. Now, that goes pretty quick because there's not a lot of metal there. But if I sand that flush, that'll be smooth and clean, and it's not going to harm the belt at all. And there we go, nice and flush. Now, we're going to take 2 1/4-inch double cap rivets. Let's drop those in our pattern or our main body. And because we took our time with our pattern, look at that. That is perfect, clean and spot on. Let's take our caps. Now we're going to set this end. Easy enough. Doesn't that look great? That is beautiful. Now this piece is ready to go. So let's just drop that on. Go down to that second hole. Look at that keeper. Tip goes right through that keeper. Nicely done. Nice distance between the 3 pieces. All right, I'm going to lift this up, drop in some Chicago screws, and we're going to do the extension, and our project is complete. Now, Chicago screws ready to go. We're going to take our extension, and we're going to put that below our main body. So 1/4-inch nickel Chicago screws, and those are decorative caps. They match our buckle. So let's drop in 4 on our main body. Flip that over. Now, we took our time on our pattern. We measured everything out clean and square. Let's see how it works. Beautiful. I can see every screw hole. Now, we won't do this in the video just to save a little time, but I always suggest dropping in a little dab of white glue on our Chicago screws, not so that they'll seal in there forever, but so that they eventually won't work themselves out, because these little screws are bad about doing that. There we go. That is perfect. Now, one thing. I'm a little bit close to my pinhole here, so I may jump back to my pattern and maybe trim 1/4-inch, maybe 3/8 inch off the end of that. But other than that, that is spectacular. Now, I'm a drummer from way back, so I'm not the guitarist and I'm not the bass player in the house, but I tell you what, I bet I've got a number of friends that would love a guitar strap just like that. And what a simple, easy project, simple decoration, beautiful buckle tip. Here's a great thing. Look at our consistent distances between pin, tip, keeper, and buckle. We took our time to measure that out, and it came out beautifully. Now, this is an 8 to 9 ounce leather, so it's going to be a little tough to get on the pins the first time. And we have to resist the urge to make that slit a little bit longer. We don't want to do that. But once this is on the pin, once it works in a little bit, this strap is going to last forever. I hope your guitar strap comes out just as beautiful as this one. Good luck with your projects.